Well, hello there. Fancy meeting you. Hello, Andy. It's a pleasure to have you here on Meet the Archaeologist. Now, obviously, you've spoken to my colleague in crime, Ginger Bones, a couple of times, but we've never actually had a chat, so this is a pleasure. So first of all, could you possibly just confirm your name, obviously, how and where it is that you studied archaeology and how you got into archaeology, and also your most recent job title?
Right, well, first of all, thanks for asking me, and it's nice to speak to the organ grinder and not the monkey, perhaps. As I don't hope. No, I'm not. No, I've had great fun talking to Jindy, and I hope we'll talk again in future. But it's great to talk to the man behind the Archaeosuit. I got involved in archaeology as a teenager, like a lot of people do. I grew up in East Kent and took part in archaeology around Canterbury in the mid to late 70s as a volunteer and as a school work experience. And really, it was a really exciting time because Canterbury's a fabulous place to do archaeology, but it's also it was also the early days of the local units, Canterbury Archaeological Trust in particular, and of course the height of the rescue movement. So it was a great place to experience and learn about archaeology and how important it was to could be to local communities. However, I went off and went to university and did drama, in fact, and worked in theatre for nearly 20 years. But in the mid-90s, I was sat in a pub garden in Oxford, which is always a good place to make decisions. We just happened to be visiting. And I was chatting about archaeology, and I'd always kept my reading up and visited sites and was a member of English Heritage and the National Trust and that kind of thing. And I remember just discussing with my partner that actually I really wanted to go back and do this again in a more formal way. So I came into it really through the continuing education route, which was still wide open then, thanks to people at Birkbeck College and the very good field archaeology certificates and diplomas and MAs run by the department at Birkbeck, in particular Harvey Sheldon, the sort of doyen of urban archaeology in London. But Harvey ran a very practical archaeology course with some really good tutors. So, I was one of the last groups to ever be taught by the late Peter Reynolds from Butser. And people of that calibre coming in to teach us, people who were actually practising archaeologists rather than and find specialists and whatever, and not academics. Not that I've got anything against academics, but it was a very practical, hands-on course. That's how I came into it. I graduated in 2003, and I've been a professional archaeologist really for the last 10 years.
Okay. So as we're finding with this series, actually, these interviews with archaeologists, there isn't really a standard career path through or into archaeology. But through your experience in the past few years as an archaeologist, what would you say is the most satisfying aspect of being an archaeologist?
I think there are two fundamental satisfactions in doing archaeology for me. And one goes back actually to why I enjoy doing theatre work so much as well, and that's the teamwork aspect. I'm the first person to admit I'm not the world's best digger, and I love working with people who are fantastic diggers. And beyond that, it's the stories that we can tell about ourselves, that we can tell about ourselves, our communities. I think fascination for archaeology goes right back to those first ancestors of ours who sat around a campfire and tried to explain where they came from. At its best, archaeology takes us back to that wonderful sense of history, heritage and community that we can both enjoy but also learn from. Okay. And I think that's the big satisfaction.
Yeah. And I suppose in that sense, I know what you mean in terms of, certainly through Archaeology, I've had a great opportunity, and I will hopefully will continue to expose myself to people who are much better at other things than I am, in different fields. But also, as you say, there's that element of archaeology being inherently charismatic in many ways. You don't have to work usually too hard to get people excited and interested, do you? So, in terms of archaeology as it is today, what challenges do you feel face archaeology in the near future? I've been asking this question of everyone so far because I think it's an important question, and one which, as many answers as possible, would probably be a good thing to try and collate.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fundamental actually to where we are at the moment. I mean, we're talking to each other. We're round about 2 weeks off the latest British government spending round. The word on the street is that the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, who fund English Heritage and the British Museum and so on, would be taking a cut of at least 10%. Other budgets might be cut by even more than that as people choose where to spend the money. So the infrastructure of professional archaeology, professional museum curatorship, like archive and so on, is under huge pressure at the moment. And it's one of the reasons that we set up the Mortimer project a couple of years ago, which was designed to take discussion of archaeology and heritage issues out of a magic circle of professionals and treat it as an environmental issue, like Friends of the Earth treat the environment. And it's something we're working way out. We're working on a number of projects at the moment, just to move it up the political agenda, to show what good we do as a profession in all sorts of ways in our communities, as well as the fact that but by their deeds shall ye know them. A society that destroys its cultural infrastructure and so on, I think, is a lesser society. So that's one of the challenges. I think the other big challenge at the moment that we face is in higher education. Traditionally, we've been a graduate profession paid like casual labour. But now even those graduates are drying up as. We're losing departments, either wholly, like the extramural department at Sussex, or in part, like Birmingham and cuts at Bristol. So there'll be fewer graduates coming through. It's not a subject that endears itself to professional university administrators because it doesn't make a huge financial return. It doesn't attract, lots of full fee paying students from, for example, the Tiger economies in the Far East. So. One of the big challenges we have is what ways into the profession are people going to have in future, and particularly when we regard, professional skills and ethics and the ability to, debate both within the profession and internationally. If we regard those things as important, how do we bring people into those mechanisms?
Yeah, well, absolutely, yeah. So we'll touch on your work with Mortimer, because I believe you're entering Mortimer 2.0 very soon. We'll touch on that and your future plans in just a moment. But just very briefly, what advice, and this is another standard question that I ask, what advice would you give to aspiring archaeologists, young or old, anyone who wants to get into archaeology?
Well, absolutely. I think at any age, that's one of the beauties of archaeology. Actually, it is one of the things you can contribute at any age and many different levels. The short answer, though, probably is the one Mrs. Worthington was told about her daughter. Don't put her on the stage. Don't do it don't do archaeology unless you really want to.
Yeah.
Certainly don't try and do it full time unless you really want to, because it is a bit of a vocation. On the other hand, if you are sure it's what you want to do, then you'll have a great time doing it. It'll be difficult, there'll be a lot of pressure, sometimes you'll wish you'd never done it, but it is rewarding in a way that we're very lucky. It can be rewarding in a way that people are very lucky to have a profession as varied and as exciting as archaeology can be. I certainly regard myself as lucky to be able to do it. But the main advice, really, actually, in all seriousness, get out there and do stuff. Get out there and do archaeology, because you can contribute at so many different levels. Either as an individual, just researching, the history of your local community.
Yeah.
Or obviously, with the community archaeology project, or with the university, or whatever. But basically, do stuff. Do archaeology.
Okay, well, that's good advice. Stuff is the way forward. Also, it's probably worthwhile just explaining. I'll just check. That is a dog in the background, isn't it?
It is.
Yes.
It is.
Okay.
This is Loki, who I've tried desperately to stop coming in on the picture.
Indeed, although quite appropriately, Loki is causing havoc. Excellent.
Exactly.
Okay.
You got it.
Exactly. Okay, then. So finally, I suppose. Could we possibly hear a little bit about what you've got going on now? What you plan in the next couple of months? I suppose. What are you up to, and what can we expect from Andy Brockman in the near future?
Okay. Well. Two things, really. I mean, as you're aware, and as I've discussed with Jindy at length, I've recently come back from Burma with the Burma Spitfires project. Archaeology of modern conflict is one of my principal fields at the moment, and so we're carrying on with the reporting on that. We've got a big public presentation coming up at the RAF Museum at Hendon in the near future, and that's going to be placed online as well, so people who can't get to Hendon are going to be able to watch the reporting on what was a very high-profile project. And one of the things that's come out of the back of that is a good working relationship with wargaming.net, who funded the Burma project, and who are really keen to invest in heritage projects and archaeology projects in all over the world, actually, which reflect obviously their business interests with things like World of Tanks and World of Warplanes and so on, but give something back to the community. So they're investing in museums, veterans groups, and in future archaeology projects, which I'm involved in developing two at the moment. So I hope to be able to give you more detail on that very soon. So there are those archaeology projects, and at the same time I'm continuing working with schools. A couple of projects coming up at the moment, one looking at a World War II prisoner of war camp in the second school, and another one looking at one of the first open air schools for children with special health needs in London, and that's an ongoing project. We've been doing it for about 5 years now, and so that's a really nice one, because again it's working with hopefully a whole bunch of really talented, engaged future archaeologists. And the final thing is Mortimer, and you mentioned Mortimer 2.0. I mean, Mortimer is really it's as good and as important as the community that take part in it, and we're rebooting it. We've been running it for 2 years, and we're rebooting it with adding new social media, and hopefully bringing in even more people to continue the work we've been doing on trying to protect archaeology and heritage as part of the environmental debate that we're having as a society, really. I mean, the slogan we've got for Mortimer is "Our past, our future, our choice." That's what we want to promote. We want to promote people's engagement with history, archaeology, heritage, the landscape, the environment that they live in, and to take part in the debate about how we treat that environment. And I think that's probably the most important thing that I'm involved in at the moment.
Okay, and that very much fits in, I suppose, with what we were talking about before, the need for community involvement coming out of the ivory tower. So I'll as I'm always happy to do, I'll definitely put a link to Mortimer in the video information below, and obviously behind the scenes we'll continue talking about where that might go. It's a very interesting project, actually, so I'm very pleased to be involved in that in any way. Okay then, Andy. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure. It's also been a pleasure meeting what we could hear of Loki, which is wonderful. Yeah, thank you very much. And also, please do keep us informed and involved in what your future excavations may bring. I've heard something on the grapevine, but obviously I can't say what I've heard. But it sounds very exciting.
No, it's frustrating not to be able to talk about it in more detail. But when particularly when you're dealing with sort of corporate entities, they're giving you sort of fairly substantial funds. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Mm-hmm. You're tied to their sort of PR schedules and whatever. But no, that hopefully there is some good stuff coming up, and I'll let you know as soon as we can go public on anything. So, I mean, as I've said to you before, it's really important, I think, to communicate this stuff, and also particularly using the social medias and the way you're doing it. So, and in fact, certainly the guys at Wargaming I'm working with are very well aware of that, and that's why we're doing the webcast to Hendon and so on. So I'll make sure you get the links for all that when it happens.
That's wonderful. So once again, thank you very much, and until next time, bye-bye.
Cheers, Mark.
Ta-ra.
Bye-bye.